Hello, welcome to ME 510, Economics and Policy of Engineered Energy Systems. This presentation is part 3 of our 4-part module on the origins of fossil capital. In this part, we will start by talking about Karl Marx. Karl Marx is well known for his contributions to the theory of labor value, class struggle, alienation and exploitation of workers, and the materialist conception of history. Um, Karl Marx lived during this time of change in the Industrial Revolution, and so he wrote extensively on the relationship between labor and capital. Here's one famous quote that's mentioned in our readings, and that is that capital is dead labor, which, vampire-like, lives only by sucking living labor and lives the more labor it sucks. The notion here again is that the workers and the capital have this permanent struggle, and we'll try to understand what are the dynamics of this struggle. And in order to do this, let's look at some of the background. There's a quote here from the reading that the fact that the total consumption of mechanical energy in the British economy much later came to exceed the supply of the watercourses could have not possibly been a factor in the actual transition. Now, what does that mean? Um, to put it in modern times, we all know that the amount of solar energy that's reaching the planet on a given day is several times greater than the amount of energy that we consume. Unfortunately, we're only able to capture a small percentage of that. Now, the fact that all that solar energy is available hasn't made it easy for our society to move away from fossil fuels. The same thing applied in England at the time. Even though coal offered a much greater supply of energy than the country was consuming at the time, it wasn't until the necessary technological advances took place that the society was ready to move on from watercourses. Now, one thing that coal did is that it changed the relationship between the producers and the means of production. With the cotton mills, the producers, those being the industry and the capital that owned that industry, needed to bring in labor and hydropower together in those rural locations in order to produce their goods. However, once coal was discovered and the steam engine was invented, what that did is you could have an automated steam machine doing the work that multiple people had to do at the time. And so suddenly the producer has a tool with which it no longer needs as much labor as it used to. And so the value of the laborer diminishes. Okay? Now, this equation or graphic tries to show this relationship. And this is a relationship that's still true today, but certainly relevant at the time. If we start from the left, we're looking at how does capital circulate. And the idea here is that you have a certain amount of capital that's in speculative markets, in financial institutions, and obviously banks play a central role in managing this money or these financial assets. Now, some of the money that's available is available in the form of companies' assets, industrial assets, and these could be in the form of bonds or stocks or other types of financial vehicles. Now, we bring all these assets together and we mix them with the means of production. So, the means of production are the prices, the bonds, uh, basically the resources and the equipment that are required to produce a certain amount of goods. This includes the infrastructure, roads, buildings, machinery. And those have to be combined with the labor power. And so labor power, laborers tend to contribute their human effort, but it can contribute in other ways. Individuals have savings and loans, and they can contribute capital in that way as well. But the majority of us that may not have significant capital tend to contribute our hourly labor in this process. Once you combine the capital and the money, what you start is with the production process. And the production process generates goods which have their own value. And because they have their own value, they can be capital for other processes. Think about creating raw materials or refining raw materials so that people can use them as building blocks, for example. And because they have value, the chain can continue uh, several times before you get to like an end use of that capital. But in principle, money itself is not necessarily destroyed. It's a financial asset that governments have developed to help with the exchange of services. Another way to say this is that fossil capital is the self-expanding value passing through the metamorphosis of fossil fuels into CO2. So this is a central concept behind this module or in this reading. Fossil capital refers here to coal, oil, natural gas, all these fossil-based natural resources that can be transformed into energy and eventually into goods. But in that transformation, we always produce CO2. The only way we can take advantage of fossil resources is by converting them into CO2 eventually in their lifetime. It may take a few years, it may take decades, but eventually that carbon becomes CO2. Now, one of the concepts we talked about, particularly with Karl Marx, is that the adoption of technology can sometimes make it difficult for human power. And so the steam engine was one of these first technologies that was an antagonist of human power. What that means is that the capitalists, the people that had the capital, could now replace some of their labor with steam engines. And with this regard, gained power over the demands of the workers. If you go back to that formula, you will find that the deeper meaning of production in that formula is sort of a metabolism. It, it, it relates how humans and the rest of nature are connected. And what this is saying is that you take materials from nature, the capitalist who has the money to move the resources to the manufacturing facilities puts those resources in the hands of workers, and the workers have to digest it and turn it into some new product. Okay? Now, I want you to think deeply about what other aspects could be added to this formula. This article was written some time ago, and so certainly there is room for adding new concepts into this formula. I think it would be enlightening to think about how else does capital relate to both human labor and financial markets. There are many, this battle between humans and machines has been depicted in many different ways throughout history. You can go back to biblical times and look at the relationship between human labor and some of the great wonders that were built. You have the steam engine here. You have the locomotive in the US. We know that the locomotive was a big part in the expansion of the US industry and livelihood in the continent. And now in modern times, we have artificial intelligence as being the new machine that is expected to take over everything. I can tell you that even as an instructor, certainly I'm competing with artificial intelligence, or I will be at some point in my career. And so finally, what I want you to think about fossil capital is that capital does not circulate in space and through time. Basically, it lives through its own universe, its own space-time universe. And in this space-time universe, several things are interchangeable. So you start with energy and capital being intermixed with the labor forces, which take these and produce products or information. The labor usually brings in ideas, inventions, and values, and that's the unique part of human labor. I say unique, but we know that artificial intelligence is now starting to compete there. And so that relates also to how we use matter and eventually produce our products. Capital uses some of those products, including financial products for investments, and labor consumes some of those products and keeps the economy going. So hopefully you can start to see that energy systems and the use of energy have a strong relationship with capital and the use of financial assets to move the economy. This concludes part 3 of our module. We will now finish talking about part 4.